I never imagined that moving to Oak Ridge Estates would lead to a neighborhood war over electricity. The community looked perfect from the outside: well-maintained lawns, a community pool, and friendly faces that waved as I drove past. My modest ranch-style home sat on a quarter-acre lot at the end of Maple Drive, with a charming red wooden shed near the property line. The previous owners had installed exterior outlets on the shed for garden tools and holiday lighting. It seemed like a practical feature at the time. I am not the kind of person who looks for trouble. My days consisted of working from home as a graphic designer, tending to my vegetable garden, and keeping my property in compliance with the admittedly strict HOA regulations. I followed every rule to the letter: proper trash can placement, approved mailbox design, and lawn maintenance schedules. That was just how I operated. I believed in respecting boundaries and community standards. The first sign that something was amiss came with my April electric bill. The amount was nearly double what I normally paid. I called the utility company thinking there must have been a mistake. The representative assured me the reading was accurate and suggested I check for appliances that might be malfunctioning or running continuously. That evening, I went through my house unplugging devices and checking meters, but nothing seemed unusual. 2 days later, I was working in my home office when the lights dimmed momentarily. This happened several more times throughout the afternoon. Concerned about a potential electrical issue, I walked around the property looking for problems. That is when I noticed the thick orange extension cord running from my shed outlet across the property line to a sleek white golf cart parked in my neighbor Karen Williams' driveway. Karen was something of a local celebrity in our community. She served as the social committee chair for the HOA and hosted elaborate garden parties that were the talk of the neighborhood. Her husband was a successful attorney, and they lived in one of the largest homes in Oak Ridge Estates. I had met her briefly at the community welcome dinner when I first moved in 6 months ago. She had smiled politely, but seemed to size me up with a calculating gaze. I approached her house and knocked on the front door. After a minute, Karen answered wearing tennis clothes and a visor. "Hello there," I said politely. "I noticed your golf cart is plugged into my shed outlet. I have been experiencing some electrical issues, and my bill was unusually high last month." Karen looked past me toward her golf cart and shrugged. "Oh, that. The outlet by our garage is not working, and your shed is so conveniently located. I did not think you would mind since you are barely home during the day." "Actually, I work from home," I explained, "and I would prefer if you asked before using my electricity." She waved her hand dismissively. "It is just a little bit of power for my golf cart. I doubt it is affecting your bill that much. Besides, we are neighbors. We should help each other out." Before I could respond, she glanced at her watch. "I am late for my tennis match. We can discuss this another time." With that, she closed the door, leaving me standing speechless on her porch. I walked back to my property, unplugged the extension cord from my outlet, and coiled it neatly by the property line. I assumed that would be the end of it. I was wrong. 3 days later, I found the orange extension cord plugged into my shed outlet again. This time, Karen had run it through a gap in the fence rather than across the lawn, as if attempting to make it less noticeable. I unplugged it again and decided to leave a polite note attached to the cord. "Please do not use my electricity without permission. Thank you for understanding." The next morning, I found my note crumpled on the ground and the cord plugged in once more. This pattern continued for 2 weeks. Each time I unplugged the cord, it would reappear connected to my outlet within a day. I began documenting these incidents, taking photos with timestamps and saving them in a folder on my computer. My electric bill for May arrived, and it was even higher than April. I decided to try communicating with Karen again, this time via text message. Hi Karen, I have noticed your golf cart is still being charged using my electricity. This is significantly increasing my bills. Would you be willing to discuss a solution or perhaps contribute to the additional costs? I waited all day for a response but received nothing. The following Saturday morning, I spotted Karen in her driveway and walked over to speak with her directly. Karen, did you get my text about the electricity usage? She glanced up from her phone with an expression of mild annoyance. Yes, I saw it. I think you are making a mountain out of a molehill. It cannot possibly cost that much to charge a golf cart. My electric bill has doubled in the past 2 months, I explained, trying to keep my voice level. That is an extra $80 I am paying for electricity you are using. Corinne rolled her eyes. If you are that concerned about money, perhaps you should consider downsizing. Some people are not cut out for this neighborhood. Her dismissive attitude left me stunned. As she walked away, I noticed several neighbors watching our interaction from their yards. One of them, an older gentleman named Frank from across the street, approached me after Corinne had gone inside. Having trouble with Corinne Williams, he asked sympathetically. She has been charging her golf cart using my electricity without permission, I explained. Frank nodded knowingly. She does things like that. Last year, she rerouted my sprinkler system to water her flower beds without asking. When I complained, she told the HOA I was being unneighborly. Over the next few days, I spoke with several other neighbors who shared similar stories about Corinne. She had borrowed lawn equipment without returning it, parked her guests' cars in others' driveways during parties, and even harvested vegetables from a community garden plot that was not hers. Everyone seemed resigned to her behavior, unwilling to challenge her because of her influence with the HOA board. Determined to resolve the issue, I purchased a locking cover for my outdoor outlet. It cost nearly $40, but I figured it would be worth it to prevent unauthorized use. I installed it on a Tuesday morning, feeling satisfied with my solution. The satisfaction was short-lived. That evening, I returned from a grocery run to find the locking cover damaged, the plastic cracked, and hanging loosely from the outlet. The orange extension cord was plugged in once again, running to Corinne's golf cart. I was no longer just frustrated. I was angry. I took more photos, this time of the damaged outlet cover, and compiled all my evidence into a single document. I began researching electrical theft and property rights online, spending hours reading legal forums and HOA regulations. According to everything I found, what Corinne was doing was clearly theft of services and possibly trespassing. With each passing day, my patience wore thinner. I would wake up early to unplug the cord before leaving for errands, only to return and find it connected again. I began to feel like I was losing control of my own property. The sight of that orange cord became a constant reminder of Corinne's entitlement and my seeming powerlessness to stop her. One night, while reviewing my growing collection of evidence, I realized I needed to escalate the situation. If Corinne would not respect a simple request or even a physical barrier, perhaps official channels would force her to stop. With this new determination, I prepared to take my case to the Homeowners Association, unaware that I was about to discover just how deep Corinne's influence actually went. The Oak Ridge Estates HOA met on the first Monday of each month in the community center. I arrived early, evidence folder in hand, ready to present my case during the open forum portion of the meeting. I had prepared a clear, factual presentation about the unauthorized use of my electricity, complete with photos, timestamps, and copies of my increased utility bills. When my turn came to speak, I approached the podium and addressed the 5 board members seated at the long table. Good evening. I am here to report ongoing electricity theft from my property at 427 Maple Drive. Before I could continue, I noticed an exchange of glances between the board members. The HOA president, Robert Chambers, cleared his throat. "We are aware of your situation with Mrs. Williams. She has already spoken to us about it." This caught me off guard. "She has? What exactly did she say?" Mrs. Williams explained that you two had an arrangement regarding occasional charging of her golf cart, which you are now trying to renege on, Robert explained. She also mentioned that you have been hostile regarding the matter. My mouth fell open in disbelief. That is completely false. There was never any arrangement. I have documentation of multiple instances where I asked her to stop. I tried to hand my folder to Robert, but he barely glanced at it. "This seems like a personal dispute between neighbors. We suggest you work it out privately. The HOA does not get involved in these matters unless there is a violation of community guidelines." "But there is a violation," I insisted. "My property rights are being infringed upon. She damaged my outlet cover, which is destruction of property." The board treasurer, a woman I recognized as Karen's tennis partner, spoke up. "Without proof that Mrs. Williams specifically caused that damage, we cannot take action. It could have been anyone or even weather-related." I stood there, clutching my folder of evidence that no one wanted to see. The meeting moved on to the next agenda item as if my complaint had never happened. As I returned to my seat, I noticed Karen sitting in the back row, a satisfied smile playing at the corners of her mouth. The next day, I went to the local police station to file a report. The officer listened patiently as I explained the situation, but his response was not what I had hoped for. "Unfortunately, this falls under the category of a civil dispute," he said, sliding a form across the desk. "I can document your complaint, but we cannot take action on what amounts to a disagreement between neighbors over a few dollars of electricity." "But she is trespassing on my property and stealing," I argued. The officer shrugged sympathetically. "Without significant monetary damages or direct evidence of her tampering with your property, this is not something we can pursue criminally. I suggest documenting everything and possibly consulting with a civil attorney." Following his advice, I scheduled a consultation with a lawyer the following week. The meeting cost me $200 for 30 minutes, only to be told that pursuing legal action would likely cost thousands with no guarantee of success. "Small claims court is an option," the attorney explained, "but the filing fees and time investment might exceed what you would recover. Plus, if her husband is indeed an attorney as you mentioned, they might countersue for harassment." Each avenue I pursued led to another dead end. The systems I had trusted to uphold justice and protect property rights were failing me. Meanwhile, Karen continued to charge her golf cart from my shed as if nothing had happened. If anything, she seemed more brazen, sometimes leaving the cart parked near my shed for hours at a time. The situation began affecting my daily life. I had trouble sleeping, constantly listening for sounds of someone near my shed. My work suffered as I found myself distracted by anger and frustration. I started avoiding community events to minimize the chance of encountering Karen. My once peaceful home had become a source of stress. One evening, after discovering the extension cord plugged in for the 20th time, I sat on my back porch watching the sun set over the neighborhood. I had tried reasoning, documenting, reporting, and even installing physical barriers. Nothing had worked. The realization settled over me like a heavy blanket. Conventional methods would not resolve this situation. If I wanted justice, I would need to think differently. As darkness fell, an idea began to form, not one born of malice, but of determination to protect what was rightfully mine. I would need to be creative, careful, and completely within my legal rights. The solution would require research, planning, and perfect execution. For the first time in weeks, I felt a glimmer of hope. Karen Williams had no idea what was coming. The inspiration came during a weekend drive through the countryside. I passed a cattle farm with a sign that read, "Warning, electric fence." My mind immediately connected the dots. Electric fences were legal deterrents designed not to cause harm, but to discourage unwanted access. Could I apply the same principle to my outlet situation? That evening, I began researching electric fences and cattle deterrent systems. Most commercial systems operated on a pulsed electric current that caused momentary discomfort but no lasting damage. The voltage was high enough to be felt but low enough to remain safe. This seemed like exactly what I needed, a legal deterrent that would discourage Karen without causing genuine harm. My research led me to several online forums where farmers and ranchers discussed electric fence specifications. I learned about pulse duration, voltage limitations, and safety requirements. I took detailed notes, sketching circuit diagrams and listing components I would need. This had to be done correctly, both for effectiveness and legal protection. I reached out to my cousin Thomas, who owned a small ranch in the next county. He had experience with installing and maintaining electric fencing for livestock. "I need your expertise on something," I explained during our phone call, carefully outlining my situation and proposed solution. Thomas chuckled. "I have dealt with my share of entitled neighbors too. I can help you set up something that will get the message across without crossing any legal lines. Come by the ranch this weekend, and I will show you how our cattle deterrent systems work." That Saturday, Thomas gave me a comprehensive tour of his electric fence setup. He showed me the transformer, the grounding system, and how the circuit completed when an animal touched the wire. "The key is getting the right balance," he explained, demonstrating with a voltage tester. "Too weak and it will not deter, too strong and it could be dangerous. What you want is something that surprises and discourages without causing any harm." Thomas helped me design a modified circuit that could be installed inside my shed, connected to the exterior outlet. It would deliver a brief, uncomfortable but safe shock, similar to static electricity but more pronounced, to anyone who tried to use the outlet without authorization. "Remember," Thomas cautioned, "you need to make sure everything is properly documented and legal. Post clear warning signs, keep the voltage within safe limits, and make sure your property boundaries are clearly marked." I spent the next week gathering supplies: a low-voltage transformer, a pulse generator, insulated wire, warning signs, and a discreet but legal security camera to document everything. I also purchased a voltage tester to ensure the modified circuit would deliver an uncomfortable but harmless shock. The technical aspects were challenging but manageable. I carefully studied electrical codes and legal precedents regarding property protection measures. Everything I planned fell within legal boundaries. Property owners had the right to protect their assets using reasonable deterrents, provided they were properly marked with warnings. As I worked on the technical setup, I also considered the ethical implications. I did not want to hurt Karen or anyone else. My goal was simply to stop the theft of my electricity and establish respect for my property boundaries. The shock would be surprising and uncomfortable but not painful or dangerous, like touching a doorknob after walking across carpet in socks. I tested the system on myself first, touching the modified circuit with my fingertip. The sensation was startling. a sharp buzz that made me pull my hand away instinctively, but it left no lingering pain or marks. It was perfect, effective but safe. The final step was setting up surveillance. I installed a small, weather-resistant camera under the eave of my shed, positioned to capture the outlet and surrounding area. The camera was motion-activated and would record anyone approaching the outlet. This documentation would be crucial if Karen tried to make counter-accusations. By the end of the week, I had everything prepared: the modified circuit, warning signs, camera system, and a thorough understanding of my legal rights in this situation. I reviewed my plan multiple times, checking for any potential issues or oversights. Everything was in order. As I finalized my preparations, I felt a mixture of nervousness and determination. This was not about revenge. It was about standing up for myself when official channels had failed me. With the plan in place, all that remained was implementation and waiting for Karen to make her next move. I chose a Tuesday morning for the installation, knowing from observation that Karen typically had tennis lessons from 9:00 a.m. to 11:00 a.m. This would give me ample time to complete the setup without interruption. I waited until I saw her leave in her luxury SUV, tennis racket visible through the window, before beginning my work. The morning was crisp and clear, with dew still clinging to the grass as I carried my toolbox to the shed. My hands trembled slightly with anticipation as I unlocked the door and switched on my work light. The installation would require precision and care, both for effectiveness and safety. First, I disconnected the exterior outlet from the main power. Safety was paramount. I triple-checked that no current was flowing before proceeding. I removed the standard outlet and replaced it with my modified version, which looked identical from the outside but contained the special circuitry inside. The transformer and pulse generator were installed on the interior wall of the shed, hidden from view but easily accessible for maintenance. As I worked, I methodically documented each step with photos, creating a record that showed the installation was professionally done and within electrical code requirements. The modified circuit included a ground fault interrupter for safety and would only activate when someone attempted to draw power from the outlet. With the electrical components in place, I moved on to the warning signs. I purchased bright yellow caution signs that clearly stated, "Warning, this outlet is protected by an electrical deterrent system. Unauthorized use may result in electrical shock." I mounted these signs prominently on the shed wall above the outlet and at the property line nearest to Karen's house. No one could claim they were not warned. I also installed property boundary markers along the line between our yards, making it unmistakably clear where my property began and ended. These markers were small but visible, reinforcing that accessing my shed involved crossing onto my property without permission. The security camera was the final component. I positioned it discreetly under the shed eave, angled to capture both the outlet and a wider view of the surrounding area. The camera was motion-activated and would store footage on a secure hard drive inside my house. This would provide irrefutable evidence of any unauthorized access. By late morning, the installation was complete. I ran multiple tests to ensure everything functioned as intended. I verified that the shock was consistent with my design specifications, uncomfortable enough to create a deterrent but well below any harmful threshold. Satisfied with the results, I cleaned up my work area, removing all traces of the installation process. Now came the hardest part: waiting. I returned to my home office but found it impossible to concentrate on work. Every few minutes, I glanced at the security camera feed on my computer monitor, anticipating Karen's return. Hours passed without activity. I began to wonder if she had somehow learned of my countermeasure. As afternoon turned to evening, I tried to distract myself by cooking dinner and watching television, but my mind kept returning to the situation. Had I gone too far? Was this the right approach? These questions circled in my thoughts as I prepared for bed, setting my phone to alert me if the motion sensor activated. The next morning passed without incident. Karen's golf cart remained parked in her driveway, seemingly fully charged. By the second day, I began to think perhaps she had found another source of electricity or finally decided to respect my property boundaries. I allowed myself to hope the problem had resolved itself. Then on the third day, my phone buzzed with an alert just after 1:00 p.m. The motion sensor had been triggered. I quickly opened the camera app and watched the live feed. Karen was approaching my shed, orange extension cord in hand, moving with the confident stride of someone who believed they were entitled to what they were taking. She wore designer sunglasses and a tennis skirt, looking around briefly before proceeding to the outlet. My heart raced as I watched her reach for the outlet, extension cord plug in hand. There was a moment of perfect stillness, like the pause before lightning strikes, and then it happened. The moment the plug made contact with the outlet, the circuit completed. The modified system delivered exactly what it was designed to do. Karen's reaction was instantaneous and dramatic. She jerked backward with a startled yelp, dropping the extension cord as if it had transformed into a snake. Her sunglasses flew off as she stumbled backward, losing her balance momentarily before catching herself against the shed wall. Her expression transformed from shock to outrage in an instant. She stared at the outlet in disbelief, then noticed the warning sign for what appeared to be the first time. Her eyes widened as she read the text, her face flushing red with anger. She snatched up her sunglasses from the ground and stormed toward my front door. I quickly moved to my porch, wanting to meet her outside rather than having her enter my home. As I stepped outside, I could see neighbors beginning to take notice of the commotion. Karen was already halfway up my driveway, finger pointed accusingly in my direction. The confrontation I had anticipated for months was about to begin. The system had worked exactly as designed, not harmful but undeniably effective. Karen had finally experienced a consequence for her actions, and judging by the fury in her expression as she approached, she was not accustomed to consequences. I took a deep breath and prepared to stand my ground. "You electrocuted me," Karen shrieked as she stormed up my driveway, loud enough for the entire neighborhood to hear. Her perfectly styled blonde hair was slightly disheveled, and two bright spots of color marked her cheeks. I remained calm, standing firmly on my porch. "I did not electrocute you, Karen. I installed a legal deterrent system to prevent unauthorized use of my electricity. There are clearly posted warning signs." "Warning signs," she sputtered incredulously. "You deliberately set a trap for me. I could have been seriously injured." By now, several neighbors had emerged from their homes, drawn by Karen's theatrical outburst. They gathered at a distance, watching the scene unfold with undisguised interest. "The system delivers a mild shock, similar to an electric fence for livestock," I explained evenly. "It is completely safe and legal. I have documentation of its installation and specifications. What is not legal is stealing electricity from my property for the past 3 months." Karen pulled out her cell phone, fingers trembling with rage. "I am calling the police. And then I am calling my attorney husband. You will be hearing from both of them very soon." "Please do call the police," I responded, feeling surprisingly confident. I have been documenting your unauthorized use of my electricity for months. I have dated photographs, video recordings, and copies of my electrical bills showing the increase in usage. I also have footage of you damaging my outlet cover last month." This information caused her to pause momentarily, her finger hovering over her phone screen. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her face before she regained her composure and made the call. "I need to report an assault," she said into the phone, her voice carrying dramatically across the growing crowd of neighbors. "My neighbor has rigged an electrical trap that just shocked me. Yes, I need an officer at 427 Maple Drive immediately." While Karen was on the phone, Frank from across the street approached me. "Is what she is saying true? Did you rig some kind of electric shock device?" "I installed a legal deterrent system after months of her stealing electricity and ignoring my requests to stop," I explained. "It delivers a harmless shock, like a cattle fence. I have warning signs posted clearly." Frank nodded thoughtfully. "She has been taking advantage of people in this neighborhood for years. About time someone stood up to her." Other neighbors began to gather closer, some offering supportive nods or concerned questions. As the story spread through the small crowd, I could sense the mood shifting. For many of them, Karen's behavior had been a long-standing issue they had simply tolerated. When the police arrived 20 minutes later, it was the same officer who had taken my report previously. He recognized me immediately. "Officer Reynolds," I greeted him. "Thank you for coming." Karen rushed to intercept him before he reached my porch. "This person assaulted me with an electrical device," she insisted, pointing accusingly in my direction. "I want to press charges." Officer Reynolds looked from Karen to me, his expression professionally neutral. "Let me understand the situation fully before we proceed. May I see this device in question?" I led Officer Reynolds to the shed and showed him the modified outlet, the warning signs, and the property boundary markers. I explained the situation from the beginning, including my previous police report and failed attempts to resolve the issue through the HOA. "The system is designed to deliver a mild deterrent shock, well within legal safety parameters," I explained. "I have the technical specifications and documentation if you would like to see them." Officer Reynolds examined the setup carefully, and Mrs. Williams was attempting to use this outlet without permission despite these warning signs. "Yes, I have video footage from today and multiple previous occasions showing unauthorized access." Karen, who had followed us to the shed, interjected. "This is ridiculous. You cannot just electrify things to keep people away from them." "Actually," Officer Reynolds said calmly, "property owners can install deterrent systems as long as they are properly marked with warnings and do not pose a significant risk of injury. Based on what I can see, this appears to fall within those parameters." Karen's face flushed deeper red. "Do you know who my husband is? He is James Williams of Williams and Parker Law. He will have both of your badges for this." Officer Reynolds remained unruffled. "Mrs. Williams, threatening an officer is not going to help your case. From what I can determine, no crime has been committed here. This appears to be a civil matter regarding property boundaries and unauthorized use of utilities." By this point, many neighbors had gathered near enough to hear the exchange. Karen looked around, seemingly noticing for the first time how many people were witnessing her behavior. She straightened her tennis skirt and attempted to regain her composure. "This is not over," she said, her voice slightly less shrill but no less determined. "I am calling an emergency HOA meeting for tonight. We will see what the board has to say about this electric booby trap." As Karen stormed away, Several neighbors approached me with supportive comments. "She has been using my garden hose without asking all summer," one woman confided. "She blocked my driveway during her Christmas party and refused to have the cars moved," added another. What had begun as my personal stand against Karen's entitlement was quickly evolving into a community awakening. Years of accumulated grievances were suddenly finding voice. The emergency HOA meeting that Karen demanded would not unfold the way she expected. As the crowd dispersed and Officer Reynolds departed with a subtle nod of approval, I realized that the confrontation had shifted something fundamental in our neighborhood dynamic. The balance of power was changing, and Karen could sense it too. The emergency HOA meeting took place that evening in the community center. Word had spread quickly, and the room was packed with residents, many of whom rarely attended regular meetings. There was an electric energy in the air, a sense that something significant was about to happen. Karen arrived with her husband James, a stern-looking man in an expensive suit who carried a leather portfolio and wore an expression of practiced intimidation. They sat in the front row, whispering intensely to Robert Chambers, the HOA president, before the meeting began. When Robert called the meeting to order, his usually confident demeanor appeared slightly shaken. "We are here to address a complaint filed by Mrs. Williams regarding a security measure installed by her neighbor." Karen immediately stood up. It was not a security measure. It was a dangerous electrical trap that could have caused serious injury. This kind of vigilante behavior cannot be tolerated in our community. Robert nodded, looking uncomfortable. "We take these concerns seriously. However, before we proceed, I must inform everyone that after consulting with the HOA attorney this afternoon, we have learned that this matter falls outside our jurisdiction as it involves a private property dispute." Karen appeared stunned by this announcement. "What do you mean outside your jurisdiction? This affects the safety of everyone in the community." Her husband placed a restraining hand on her arm, whispering something in her ear. She reluctantly sat down, her expression darkening. Robert cleared his throat and continued. "That said, this meeting provides an opportunity to address some broader community concerns that have been brought to our attention." This was my cue. I stood up and approached the podium, carrying a folder of documentation. "Thank you for allowing me to speak. For the past 3 months, I have been dealing with unauthorized use of electricity from my property. Despite multiple requests to stop, documented complaints to the HOA, and even filing a police report, the issue continued." I presented my evidence methodically: photographs, video clips displayed on my tablet, copies of electrical bills showing the increase in usage, and documentation of my multiple attempts to resolve the issue through proper channels. After exhausting all conventional options, I installed a legal deterrent system on my property, clearly marked with warning signs. This system delivers a mild shock, similar to an electric fence used for livestock, and poses no risk of serious injury. As I spoke, I noticed many neighbors nodding in agreement. The room had grown quiet, everyone focused on my presentation. When I finished, something unexpected happened. Frank from across the street stood up. "I would like to say something. This is not just about electricity theft. For years, many of us have experienced similar behavior from certain members of our community who seem to believe the rules do not apply to them." This opened the floodgates. One by one, neighbors stood to share their experiences, stories of boundary violations, unauthorized borrowing, parking disputes, and instances where complaints to the HOA had been dismissed without investigation. The pattern was clear. and Karen's name featured prominently in many accounts. Throughout this testimony, Karen sank lower in her seat. Her husband's expression remained impassive, but I noticed him closing his portfolio and setting it aside, the legal threats evidently abandoned in the face of overwhelming community sentiment. Robert Chambers, visibly affected by the outpouring of grievances, called for order. It seems we have some significant community issues to address. I propose forming a committee to review our complaint procedures and ensure all residents are treated equally under our regulations. This suggestion received immediate approval from the room. Robert then turned to Karen and her husband. As for the immediate issue, our attorney advises that the deterrent system in question is legal provided it meets safety standards and is properly marked with warnings. However, in the interest of community harmony, perhaps both parties could agree to certain compromises. Karen's husband finally spoke, his tone professional but resigned. My wife will no longer use the neighbor's electricity without permission. Furthermore, we are prepared to reimburse the cost of the electricity used over the past 3 months. The meeting concluded with several constructive outcomes. A committee was formed to review HOA procedures, with Frank nominated as chairperson. The board agreed to install a community charging station near the clubhouse for residents with electric vehicles and golf carts. Most significantly, Karen wrote me a check for $240, the estimated cost of the electricity she had used plus the damaged outlet cover. In the weeks that followed, a remarkable transformation occurred in our community. Neighbors who had previously kept to themselves began interacting more openly. The charging station was installed and quickly became a gathering spot where residents would chat while waiting for their vehicles. Karen, though initially withdrawn from community events, gradually reintegrated, though with noticeably more respect for boundaries. One evening about a month after the confrontation, I was working in my front garden when Karen approached, looking somewhat hesitant. I wanted to apologize properly, she said, her voice lacking its usual commanding tone. My behavior was inappropriate. I should have respected your property from the beginning. The apology seemed genuine and I accepted it with a nod. Thank you, I appreciate that. As she turned to leave, she paused. The new community charging station was a good idea. Sometimes it takes a shock to the system to make us realize when change is needed. I could not help but smile at her choice of words. She smiled too, perhaps the first authentic smile I had seen from her before walking back to her house. Standing there in my garden, watching the peaceful neighborhood around me, I realized that what had begun as a simple dispute over electricity had evolved into something more significant. It had become a testament to the power of standing up for what is right, even when it is difficult. Sometimes, all it takes is one person refusing to accept injustice to inspire an entire community to change for the better.